Welcome, Tony Pisanelli, to Ordinary Visionary. So glad to have you on. You've been on my list for some time, but I've never met you before. But I like what you're doing, and I was really looking forward to interviewing you. So tell me, Tony, how are you an ordinary visionary?
Thank you, Robert, for allowing me to present today. So, I'm an ordinary visionary in the context that I was an Australian corporate citizen for over 3 decades, but really never climbed to any great height. At best, I did was reach middle management level, and during that journey, had to watch people younger than me and less experienced and knowledgeable go past me. Now, part of that was due to a lack of ambition on my part and not wanting to give up so much of my life to the corporate world. I was a keen observer of the people around me, and I watched one corporate executive invest so much into his career that it came at the cost of a marriage, his relationship to his children, his health and well-being. And I thought,
That's
you know
quite a
what,
high
I really,
cost for being successful.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I thought,
so-called
you know what,
success, but
yeah, and I don't want to climb that ladder
yeah.
to reach the wall. And as Stephen Covey said, sometimes people climb the ladder of success only to find out it's leaning against the wrong wall. And many people find
Right.
that out too late.
Yeah,
And I didn't want to make that same, I didn't want to have that journey. I wanted a solid corporate career. And that's the element which makes me ordinary. And also, I remember a conversation I had with a young gentleman in the workplace, and he said, "Tony, I know you're a solid uh, employee and you're honest and you're reliable and you turn up every single day, but tell me, what makes you stand out? What do you stand for? What are you truly about?" And it was interesting. I couldn't really answer that question.
how
And
long ago was that?
Carl, sorry,
How long ago was that?
that was probably in the mid 1990s.
Okay.
And I remember Carl Jung was a famous psychologist saying, "The world will ask you who you are. And if you don't have an answer, it will tell you." Okay. And that answer came shortly after when I was in my manager's office at the time. And I had just completed a successful project for the company. And the company at the time was going through somewhat of a transformation where they were shedding people. And during this meeting, he asked me whether I would be interested in being made redundant. And it came as a complete shock to me. But it was a wake up call, if you like, to realize, you know what, you could be in demand one day and thrown on the scrap heap the next.
Yeah.
And that's what the answer is. The world will tell you that I was an invisible cog and I was dispensable. So that became the turning point to shift that dynamic, and that led me into the world of specialization, and that was risk management. And from there, it sort of allowed me to get onto conference stages, speaking in front of executive groups, and sort of raised my visibility. And at the same time, secured my career from that unexpected job loss situation, if you like.
Yeah.
So that became that ordinary to extraordinary transition, if you like. Also, at the same time, I had been a keen observer of the people around me, the people in the workplace. I took a lesson from the story of Van Gogh, Johann Van Gogh, who was a German critic and playwright and screenwriter. And
Mm.
he was told when he got to a point when he didn't have sufficient material to write plays, someone advised him, look at the people around you and they will help shape, form, and develop the characters you could write about. So I took that lesson and applied it in terms of my own career journey. And I looked at how people in the workplace went about managing their career. And it was interesting. A lot of people, their workplace was a bit of a prison or a merry-go-round, repeating the same cycle day in, day out. And then there was the people, I could divide the people into two groups that I saw in the corporate workplace. And that was, the first group was the person who waited for the future to arrive.
Okay.
And if you do that, Robert, what it brings your way is not necessarily going to be to your liking.
Right.
And then there was a second group, fewer in number than the first, that were more entrepreneurial.
Yep.
They were creating the future.
Yep.
One gentleman I worked alongside very early was using his corporate career as a platform to one day start his own financial planning practice. And he was going through the different areas of the company, getting financial planning, revenue, expenditure, cash flow analysis experience, taxation, to allow him to facilitate that journey. So you have the two groups, the proactive and the reactive.
Yep.
So that steered me to become more proactive. So that sort of give you an insight in terms of how I transitioned from once ordinary and vulnerable to a bit more extraordinary, and actually secured my employment to the point when I wanted to leave and I asked, hey, I'm now ready to go. They knocked me back because I had become more valuable to them than they were to me at that point. So that was my transition point from those two elements you spoke of.
So how long was your corporate career?
34 years.
Okay.
So I survived a lot of transitions and company restructures. The company I worked for was a telecommunications company, an Australian monopoly. And when I started in my employment in the early 1980s, Robert, the company employed over 90,000 people.
Wow.
But by the time I left, it had dwindled to just over 30,000. Albeit there was also outsourced providers in that and consultants that made up, but it had almost reduced by a third in number. So I sort of pat myself on the back that I was able to navigate my way through those turbulent times. Unfortunately, many didn't, and I watched them. Many of them fell into crisis. Many in particular, Robert, when they lose their job, it's more than losing their job. Their identity, their self-confidence, their daily routine and structure, their place in the world has vanished.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, and that was another key observation, and I'll share this because it's important to what I do today. So they were made redundant, and the best the company could offer them was a transition service. That involved, we'll update your resume, we'll help you polish your interview skills, we'll help you with job search strategies. But the problem was, Robert, these people were wounded.
Yeah.
Some considered, running the warm bath and getting the razor blades out. It can really take some of these people who are so invested in their career to a dark place.
And they might be in a place where maybe they didn't save a lot for retirement. They were thinking about it a little later. They've let go of their job. They don't have a lot of savings. They feel they're a little older, and will they be able to get a job? So, yeah, a lot of people were in that place.
Absolutely, yes, all of that. But I think another key hit was one day they are a key power broker in the organisation, and the next day they have no power. They're on the scrap heap.
Yeah.
Hard shift to deal with.
Yeah.
And that became the clue I needed to say, okay, maybe at some point when it's my turn to leave, that's the audience that I can serve.
So when did you leave? How many years ago?
I left corporate world in 2015
Okay.
after beginning in 1981.
So that's about 9 years. So, um, is that right? Did I do the math right?
34 years. 1981 and
Yeah.
2015.
But I'm saying 9 years since you retired.
Oh, yes, I've been out of the workforce for 9 years
Right.
running my own coaching practice.
Okay. So I'm interested, when it got to the end of your career, did you have a plan? Were you thinking through your plan? Did you work up to that plan, or was it kind of abrupt and then you figured out your plan?
Now, I started planning about 2 or 3 years in advance, having
Right.
observed others who had become proactive, the financial planning guy, for example.
Right.
Um, in terms of me identifying what I truly wanted to do as my next phase, it emerged spontaneously as a natural inclination. What had happened in the last probably 5 or so years of my career, I began mentoring the next generation of company leaders. I would take them under my wing. We'd go to meetings, and I'd help them show how I planned for the meeting, so we had an agenda, so we weren't wasting people's time. I would get them to present to me before they presented to a larger audience, and I would give them feedback. I would
Right.
give them career advice. And management observed this and encouraged it. I was sort of doing it as sort of a natural inclination, as I said, and then it became obvious, okay, that is probably where you're going next in this coaching and mentoring phase of your life. So that was the
Right.
clue I needed. So I started getting coaching qualifications, preparing
Right.
me. I even did a program here in Australia that would help me create a business, because it's one thing doing the coaching, but there's also a business dynamic that needs to succeed,
Yeah.
obviously. As we know, a lot of small businesses go under very early days because they don't have the capital base, for example, or they can't differentiate themselves from their marketplace, and therefore they're part of the noise.
Had you saved enough money when you retired that you could have not worked, or you felt you had to keep working and you wanted to keep working?
I had a financial base, yes. I
Mhm.
didn't have to if I wanted to, but I was very cognizant of a story of a friend of mine shared with me about he was a school teacher working for a private school system, and he said a friend of his in the school had retired 12 months earlier, and he caught up with him after 12 months, and he had noticed that he wasn't as sharp as he used to be. He took longer to answer questions. So he was already in cognitive decline because he had not kept himself mentally active. And I
Right.
thought, you know what? I'm not going to go down that path.
I can
Um,
relate to that. That's why I'm very active in my retirement. I'm only 1 year in, but yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful. I mean, as part of my career model, I actually do not encourage people to retire. If you're leaving the workforce, that's one phase, but you come out of it. There is there is still a contribution you can make in the world.
Yeah. Well, I've talked to a lot of people about that. I have one client who was in the marketing business for years, and ultimately, when he retired from that, he became a full-time painter, and he loves being a painter. But that's kind of an unusual career choice. But he had an artistic background. So, so what happened after you retired? You had a plan. You'd gotten coaching skills. You had a sense of what people needed. So I'd be interested to know how you put your business together and what the steps were. And I know you wrote a couple books. One in what 2000? When was the first book?
Probably 218, 219, and then I released my second one um, middle of this year.
Right.
Um, and I share a lot of stories, both from my corporate days and coaching clients, in terms of how their career journeys evolves over time, and how events that appear to be random or chaotic can actually serve them. So I've coached a number of clients who lose their jobs, Robert,
Yeah.
and it's a devastating event. But it's become a pattern I've observed now that each one of those individuals who lose their jobs, when you probe into their mind, you find out that was part of them didn't want to be there anymore.
Yeah.
Either they were being stifled, micromanaged, they were no longer growing, the work had become meaningless. So actually losing their job had become a positive, but they couldn't see it. It was Steve Jobs Steve Jobs said, one of the best things that happened to me was being sacked from Apple the first time round.
Yeah, and that was a big sack. I mean, he was the founder of the damn company, for God's sake.
Yeah, for God's sake, if someone actually is a co-founder or whatever and he gets the bullet, what chance has the rest of us got?
Right. It's so miraculous that he came back. I mean, that's 1 in a million, that he came back and took Apple to new heights. It's one of the most amazing corporate stories ever.
It is, and he talks about how it was an opportunity for him to reevaluate his life and his trajectory and learn new things. And he went and explored calligraphy, and which he brought back to Apple in terms of simplicity and elegance of design. So I say to my clients who lose their jobs, it's not all bad. There's light at the end of the tunnel here. It's an opportunity to reevaluate, reassess, and go forward, recognising part of you didn't want to be there. It had become a bit of a death sentence in many regards.
Yeah. If someone, upon leaving or being fired, finds someone like you, that can really understand their situation, given your corporate background and then your training, can make all the difference in the world. And I wonder what it's like for perhaps the majority that don't get much help. I mean, do you have a sense of that from people you've talked to? Or, either things are spiraling up or they're spiraling down, and just wonder.
I'll give you one example of a gentleman I spoke to a while back who had lost his job. And I said, okay, well, how did that affect you and how did you respond? That is your question, is it not, Robert?
Yeah.
And he said, I was a major salesman for that company, and out of nowhere, they terminated my services. I said, how did you feel? He said, I felt rejected.
Yeah.
I said, fair enough, that's a fair call. And then what did you do? How did you manage beyond that? Did you start looking for another job, or what did you do? He goes, I went on a 6-month bender.
Oh, dear.
Do you know what a bender means? That means they're on a drinking gig for 6 months.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's how he coped and got through it. And then he eventually started his own business and got going again. But he took 6 months to actually overcome it.
Wow. Yeah, and when you go on a bender, when you're consuming alcohol, it blots things out emotionally. So you're in a particular state.
And then
you can't really look and reflect and no,
it becomes a blur. And then I spoke to another gentleman. He lost his job back in 2010. I spoke to him earlier this year, and he was still carrying the anger of that event. And
really?
Every time, Robert, that there's a media announcement of a company layoff, it takes him back to his own moment.
Sure.
Because it hasn't been resolved emotionally. the emotions resurface.
Yeah.
That's where I come in. Let's resolve the emotion. Let's move forward so you're not carrying it for decades or engaging in not inappropriate behavior, but behavior is probably not serving you long term.
Yeah. So, one quick question, given that what I did for my career was help people attract clients, I'm interested in, once you made the transition, how did you get your first clients? And how do you get them now?
Well, I've got a marketing group that do reach out on LinkedIn. So they target my particular clientele, which is business professionals and senior executives. And we just prompt them around their career situation and how long they've been doing that. And then once your business gains momentum, Robert, referrals become an avenue for you. Now, the other element here is I'm 65 years of age. I was never looking to create a coaching empire. So it's something I'm doing to give back, make a contribution, stay mentally active, be relevant in life. So it's, I'm happy to have a handful of clients and help them on their career journey, particularly around taking that next step, as I did.
Yeah. How long do you typically work with a client?
Each client is different, but typically can be anywhere between a 3-month block, a 6-month block, or even 12 months. So, for example, recently I coached an executive who wanted to leave corporate, but we needed to identify, well, okay, before we leave, what does the place you're trying to step into actually look like? Otherwise, you're just landing in a void and the world's not going to come out and save you. So we need to create that picture of where they were moving to, one. Secondly, they needed to shore up their financial base because you need that buffer. I mean, we've still got to live.
Yep.
And then she also waited for the opportunity for a redundancy package to come along so she could have add to her financial reserve.
Which was like a 6 months income or something like that?
I probably gave her a 12-month income.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And also, so she makes the decision to approach her management to say, I'd like a redundancy. Now, this person was a high-end, talented person, so they weren't overly excited about her leaving because they could see her going further up in the company as a female executive. But she said, look, I'm now a mother of 2 children. I'm not as committed as I once was. So she explained her situation. So they gave her the redundancy payout, which she was very pleased about. But after she's made the decision, and that's where a lot of our coaching happened after that, she's going, holy moly, there's no turning back now.
It's real.
Okay, and she shared the moment, Robert, where she was handing back her laptop, her security card, her mobile phone that was company provided, and realizing this was real. So she needed me by her side in that time to say, okay, it's okay. You'll be safe. We know where we're going.
Yeah. It's like being cast out into the wilderness. You're on the edge of the desert. There's a lot of rocks and trees and streams behind you, and ahead of you is a wasteland. I mean, that's just what popped into my mind. And it's a bit like, where do I go? How do I survive? I don't have my tools with me anymore. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah,
You're
feels
leaving,
like that.
you're not just leaving a job, and this is where I appreciate this because I went through my own journey. You're not leaving just a job. You're leaving an old world behind.
Yeah, really.
Where all your friends and associates were.
Yeah.
And stepping into a different world. I mean, appearing as a guest on podcast, Robert, as I am today, was not part of my corporate world.
Right.
writing books was not part of my corporate world. Writing executive reports was, but not this stuff. So
Yeah.
can you see? I've moved into a different world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what these people are doing.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the steps, typical steps that someone goes through with you. What do you do first? What do you do second? What do you do third? And I know everyone's a bit different. Sometimes people have got it more together and they can do it faster. Some people take longer.
Well, one of the first, so I've got a 5-step coaching methodology, and that's been another reason for my sustained success as a coach is the concept of having a unique mechanism or model that you take people through.
Yeah.
So I was very mindful of assembling that so I could differentiate myself from other coaches in the marketplace who are primarily employment advisors because, Robert, they'll help you find the next job.
Yeah.
I'm more about helping you connect with the bigger picture of your life, as it were.
Yeah.
Because what happens, we reach a certain point in age, and Natalie Bassingthwaighte explained this brilliantly. You get to a certain point where you start asking your question, what am I here for? It's not a question you typically ask yourself in the first phase of your career, is it?
Right. No.
It becomes a purpose question. So step one in my coaching methodology is called defining moments. And I work with people to look at certain events in their career that they're still holding on to, which may represent a scar. Okay? They were wounded and we need to release that. Other defining moments would be where you realised what your core strength and competency was that you could utilise to do something else. And we start building that picture out. So that's the defining moment angle. Another key element of the defining moment, which is something I went through in my life journey, I went on a vision quest at a certain point because I'd reached a frustration point in my career and I just wanted to, just do a bit of a refresh in terms of where I was life-wise. And
Yeah.
I did this vision quest, and on one morning we ventured out into the Australian bush to do a high ropes exercise. And I have a fear of heights.
Perfect.
Not good for Tony, right? As we get closer and closer to the obstacle course, Tony's hands become very perspired. Now, it wasn't obligatory, Robert, that we had to do it, but I thought, you know what, let's have a go. So I was encouraged by the group. There's about 40 of us on that vision quest, and I've climbed up this stepped ladder, up a pole, and I'm standing on a little timber platform. Legs are shaking, and it took me a while to let go of the platform and to step onto the ropes. And as I stepped on, the ropes began to shake. And I said to the people below, look, the ropes are shaking. And they said, it's not the ropes that are shaking, it's you. And then I get halfway across these ropes very, very slowly, can I add, Robert?
Yes.
And I get to the halfway point, and that's when there's a dip in the ropes, right? And it's starting to wobble even more.
Yeah.
And I said to the people, you know what? I've come halfway. That's pretty good, isn't it? I'm going to go back.
Hire a helicopter to take you off.
Yeah. And then someone said, Tony, for God's sake, you are as far back from the start as you are to the end. You may as well keep going.
Yes, really.
So I shuffled across.
Yeah.
Then I gently stepped down and put my feet back on solid ground, and it was just a sense of relief and joy. And then the group they applauded for a little bit, but then they moved on to the next person. Their attention went to the next person who had to do the exercise. So while I was standing on my own and just regathering myself, Robert, after this very
This
challenging experience that took a lot out of
terrifying
me.
experience of near death.
Yes. Two ladies approached me. They were in the group, and they said, Tony, we weren't going to do that exercise, but we watched what you went through, and if you could do it, we're pretty sure we can do it. So they went ahead and did it themselves, and they just whizzed through. They did it
Yeah.
in half the time I did. And what was interesting as I reflected on that, I got more joy and satisfaction of having inspired two other people take a journey rather than actually reflect in the afterglow of my own success.
Right. That's great.
And that provided another clue in terms of my defining moment. The greatest joy, satisfaction, and fulfillment comes from what you do for others in moving them along their life journey, not what you've achieved for yourself.
Good lesson.
Key defining moment. And that's what I share with people is, what journey can you take other people on? Now that you've gone through whatever you've experienced in your career. So that's the defining moment.
Yeah.
The second pillar of my coaching model is career and you. I'm a big believer that your career should be a natural extension of your own character and personality, not taking on a role or title and losing yourself in the process. I clued into this, Robert, because I saw a lot of people experience an identity crisis when they lost their job. They no longer knew who they were.
Right. Yeah. So identity is I am this role.
Yes.
And that defines everything. And without the role, who am I? So it's a great opportunity for personal growth, if nothing else.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I shed back the layers of the corporate title and said, who am I? I'm really a teacher. Coaching is a pathway for me to express my teaching character. Writing books is a pathway to teaching. Appearing as a podcast guest is a teaching, sharing stories. So that's what needed to be expressed. So that's the second pillar. And as Jim Morrison said, the greatest freedom you can have in life is the freedom to be yourself. So that's a key pillar of the career, which I work with it. The third pillar is about integrating your career and life. For a lot of people, and this is where they talk about the work-life balance, their career and life are these two separate entities, and one interferes with the other.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, is it possible that your career and life merge and it's just a life where you're expressing what you're here to do? And I took the lesson from Richard Branson, who said, I don't see work as work and play as play. I see it as living.
That's great. Whenever you see Richard Branson, you feel he's very self-actualized. He's smiling, he's radiant, he's all encompassing. His life is his life, and that includes everything. Yeah.
His life and career are not jobs, they're adventures.
Yeah, really.
They're adventures. And that's what I'm trying to convey with people is let's make it an adventure. I mean, the ideal career, as I see it, is your vacation and vocation merge. The fourth pillar of my coaching model is what is your contribution to humanity? So this is where I'm taking people beyond themselves, beyond their ego and titles to say, okay, I'm here to make a greater contribution. As a young boy, Robert, no doubt like me, you would have watched the Superman TV series.
Oh yeah, I wanted to be Superman, as did every other young boy of the time.
Exactly. There's a Superman in all of us.
I'm a little older than you, but we watched the Superman series with George Reeve.
Yes, so did I. Yes.
Way back when, in the in the
Yes.
late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah, in my case, it was the mid to late 60s, the small TV, the black and white set.
Right, right.
And so, and why I share that with the Superman element is you've got the two personas here. You've got the mild mannered Clark Kent
Yes,
doing his everyday job, and then you've got the Superman. And I'm saying we have both those elements inside all of us.
yes, true.
You just shared that as a boy. You wanted to be a superhero.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So can we take that step from a mild mannered Clark Kent who's just doing a regular job to moving that career on a journey where now it's about contribution? It's no longer about the greater title, the more power. It's the question is, how can I use my talent to serve the planet? That's what Steve Jobs did.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what Walt Disney did. That's what Taylor Swift does. She's
yeah.
more than a singer. She's impacting millions of people, motivating and inspiring young women who've gone through hardship or trauma as she did in her own life. That is the ultimate career. Now, I'm not saying everyone is going to do that at the same magnitude and scale, but what is it that you're contributing to?
Yeah.
So that's the fourth pillar. And the final pillar is having an entrepreneurial mindset. To thrive in today's uncertain world, you have to start thinking as an entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is a risk taker, okay? Informed risk taker. Um, Jeff Bezos worked in a financial job and he left that to begin Amazon. Okay, that's his. So he's gone from Jeff Bezos, the financial consultant, Clark Kent, if you were,
Yeah.
to beginning this conglomerate. That's his Superman is starting Amazon. Does that make sense? That's where I'm using the analogy.
Yeah,
That
sure.
involved
Sure.
taking risk. It involved, as Tom Peters said, sometimes you have to destroy the old to begin the new. And he was prepared to destroy his old finance career.
Yeah.
And that's where I say, if you really want to step in and play a bigger game, you're going to have to let go and destroy the corporate role. That has just been a apprenticeship journey, a stepping stone to what you're here to do and become who you are meant to become.
I love that model because you're challenging people not just to be more successful. And a lot of motivational literature, excuse me, that I read early in my career was all about that. And that has a certain value. The Earl Nightingale and the what's his name, Think and Grow Rich,
Napoleon Hill, yes.
Napoleon Hill, and there's a lot of great ideas in that. But the idea, the central idea of making a contribution is often left out, and it goes to my ego to be successful. I'm more successful. I'm making more money. People notice me, but am I really making a difference? And we have a big example of that in the United States called Donald J. Trump, the most successful, emptiest person on planet Earth. You know,
Yes, there's always a perception with Donald that it's about Donald. Uh,
yeah, it's all about Donald, right?
yes. But anyway, that's his journey. And just to explain how I uh, stumbled on, if you like, the importance of making a contribution was I remember reading a story of a gentleman who was in his late 80s and he's on his deathbed, Robert, and he's in a care hospital, and he wakes up one morning and it's approaching the final days, and he called his nurse over and he says to the nurse, "I'm in pain." And she said, well, where's the pain? Where do you hurt? She goes, well, actually, I've got two types of pain going on. The first pain was the pain in his physical body. And the second pain was the pain in his mind, because he was now reached a point where he started looking back on his life and realizing he never became the person he really wanted to become and the difference he could have made in the world. So he, in effect, was saying, I stayed Clark Kent. I never became the superpower, talented person I knew I was. And that pain of regret was greater than the physical aspect. And I thought, this is really important. This is an important facet of my career coaching model as well. Don't look back with the regret that you never lived the life you were born to live.
Yeah. Yeah. It becomes pretty deep stuff because, there's so much potential for us in so many dimensions in our life. And we are, as beings on the planet, we're very selfish. And we want things for ourselves. And after a while, that there's the payoff of that gets less and less. Whereas if you've been making a difference, contributing to people, helping people in whatever way you can, it's a whole different perspective on life.
Yeah, I mean, Robert, I see tremendous worth and value in what you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, and I say that because there's an old biblical statement that says, don't hide your light under a bushel.
Yeah.
You've created a platform for people to present their light, their story, how they help people. Yeah. And we don't know who's watching this today and what message this represents for them and how it may impact their life going forward. So you've created that platform.
Yeah.
Now, neither of us are going to be Jeff Bezos in this world, but it doesn't matter.
No.
It could be one person. It could be 10 people. We're still putting our light out in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, that's an ordinary visionary, someone that has visions and sees a possibility to make a difference. And, in my career, I think we go up and down. I mean, I think it was very valuable you sharing where you were in the turning points in your career. And, when you're in marketing, the evil, the evil profession of marketing, in some senses, selling and we often see marketing as conning people, So working through all of that to see, well, how can I be honest about what I'm offering? How can I be a servant of my clients to really help them make a difference? And so then every day you feel, well, I did my best. I helped people as much as I possibly could. That doesn't mean you can't earn a decent living. But, so it's been a very fulfilling life. I've been self-employed since I got out of high school. I did not go the corporate route.
So you're an entrepreneur, basically, Robert.
Yeah, by nature. I like to do my own projects on my own things and put my own stuff together. And I'm not a big team type of guy either, So, but I found my niche, and it's been very satisfying.
Were there times where you hit rock bottom and you thought, maybe I should just go out and find an employment job?
Yeah, a few times.
And how did you work through those challenges?
Well, it was so long ago that it's hard to remember. I think I just kept looking and say, what's the possibility? I mean, the the lifestyle of a successful self-employed person is in many ways the best job in the world. You don't have a boss beating down on you. You can exercise your creativity in an unlimited kind of way. Um, so there's a lot of freedom if you're good at what you do. And so I always tell my wife, uh, sweetie, I'm not that smart, but I sure am persistent, you know, and it's keeping on. And it's like, oh, that didn't work. Well, I learned something. Let's try something
Yes,
else. Let's try something else. Do some reading here. Let's take a workshop here. Let's try to figure out how this could best work. Let's learn and teach all the time, So
exactly. Yes,
yeah,
that's beautiful. I mean, you're still doing marketing today.
yeah, yeah,
You're marketing the person in front of you, putting them out in the world. So that's marketing.
yeah.
Is there any um, agenda or negativity? No, you're just genuinely helping someone get a message out in the world.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And the people that were most successful that I worked with had a passion for what they did for whatever reason, just like you. You had a passion, you had a connection, you understand how it worked, you saw a need for something. And those are the people that I tend to attract because it wasn't about a lot of hype about making zillions of dollars. Because, generally those kind of goals are very, very hard to achieve. And when people go on promises, oh, I could make $5 million a year. Well, not a lot of people make $5 million bucks a year or whatever. So it's not about that.
And if you do, have you actually achieved happiness?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the guy that you mentioned, he lost
Yeah,
his family, he lost everything for his job success. Uh, there's something in the Bible about that. What is it? Gain the world but lose your soul?
exactly.
Kind
Yes.
of like that.
That's
So,
so true.
so it's always been important for me to maintain my integrity, not lie or exaggerate, keep my promises to the best of my ability. When I make a mistake or don't live up to what I hope for, to apologize for it, to live in, the truth in the moment, whatever it is. And you can, you see, I don't know if you watched the Olympics this summer. I watched a little, but here are these people that just work their heart out. This is real stuff. Like the gymnastics and whatever it is, the real stuff. And what an amazing character building thing that is for the rest of their life. To have a goal, to work very hard, to go for it, to do the best they can. And they can bring that to the rest of their life, whatever it is. I hope
Yes,
they do.
it requires extreme dedication and mastery
Yeah.
to do that. It was interesting as you were speaking there, and I was reminded of a client. You talked about, being in integrity. So this gentleman was sharing how he worked for a banking organisation, and he was asked to sell products to customers, right? Which
Yeah.
they may not have necessarily needed, but the bank was pushing their revenue agenda. And he would meet with them for an hour, and then his manager would come into his office and say, well, what did you sell them? He said, I didn't sell them anything. They didn't really need what we were offering. He goes, well, that doesn't matter. We need to meet our revenue targets. He goes, well, I'm just building a relationship so they can get to trust me and like me and do business in the future. So because of his attitude around his integrity, eventually he was moved out of, his services were terminated.
Yeah.
So he was upset about that, but I said, can you see that that was actually a defining moment or a gift where you now, by not being employed by that company, don't need to live out of integrity and lose sleep at night that, you've misled someone or you took advantage of someone, all because of some sort of numerical target.
Yeah, really.
So and that became his to find where he saw, all right, I don't need to carry that guilt. And now he works for himself in a small business where he gives people financial product advice, and he does it with their genuine need in mind.
Yeah. And it's nice that there are people like that.
Yes.
And sometimes it takes slower to build a business, but you build trust. And over a period of time, people refer you because, John is not going to pressure you. He'll really try to find out your situation and really help you make really good financial decisions. That kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's clear when you speak to him that first and foremost in his career priorities, he genuinely cares about the people he serves.
Yeah. Exactly.
And probably the only way you're going to do that is outside all the corporate shenanigans, unfortunately.
Yes. Where you have to drive for more profit all the time. More profit is always good. Less profit is always bad. I mean, it's kind of a distorted value system. Right now, the American stock market is the highest point it's ever been. And everyone goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, who knows if that's good or not? It could crash tomorrow. You never know. But
we'll see, yeah. But the point I'm making is sometimes company metrics and our own measurement of ourselves and what we're here to do don't always align.
Yeah, exactly. So, Tony, tell us about your books. I see them behind you over your left shoulder there. Want to grab them? If you can do that without unhooking yourself.
Yeah, so show us your first one. Books. So that one is the Phoenix Career Principles.
Yeah. Now, is that some of the principles we've been talking about today?
Essentially, but the model I explained was actually in this one. So I hadn't fully developed that. That was early after I left corporate.
Right.
The modelling career by design has evolved and been refined as I've coached more and more people, obviously. Yeah, right. And so that's this one. And they're not big reads. I deliberately wrote books that weren't big volumes because my client base, and in fact, a lot of people in the world nowadays struggle to find the time to read.
They do, me included.
So, but the books were written just to get my story out in the world and other people's stories. And also it gives you that credibility layer in the world as well. It's interesting. It's become far easier today to be accepted as a podcast guest because you've got the body of knowledge behind you to say that there must be some gravitas behind this person. He must know what he's talking about. Whereas without those, I may or may not be accepted as a guest.
Yep. It definitely doesn't hurt to have a book if you're a professional. Doesn't hurt. You might not make a lot of money at the book. You might. Some do.
Well, the books are really business cards.
Yes.
I'll give away a block of 10 to people who know others who may be in need of career coaching. The books are, from a sales angle, no, that is why you're writing a book, then you're being misguided in that pursuit.
Right. Unless you're trying to write novels for a living, but that's a whole other different conversation. So, Tony, I really appreciate this interview. And what I want to acknowledge you for is your calm, cool, collected, focused kind of approach. There's no histrionics. There's no over-the-top garbage. It's really solid principles that I get that you've really you've internalized for yourself. And you get a sense that if someone worked with you, they'd really be in good hands. You'd slowly but with kindness take them through the ropes,
Yes.
so that they came out on the other side, in a better place.
That's well put. Yes, I mean, that's something else I've learned in relation to the people who've served me in terms of sustaining my business and writing the books. And my editor has not just been an editor of my books, her and her husband, they've been truly invested in my journey.
Yeah,
And
great.
that's the same principle I apply in my coaching business. Am I just coaching someone from a transactional, here you go, we'll have a chat for an hour, I'll take your money and see you later? Or am I genuinely interested on where that journey takes them?
Yeah. Yeah. One thing about this, doing these interviews, is I've met with a lot of people that were clients, and some I hadn't talked to for 10 or 15 years. And they said, hey, I want to be interviewed. And I've heard some great stories about their successes and their journey through their life. So it's been a good sort of completion of the cycle of working with people for the past 40 years.
Yes, and it enriches your own life, does it not? When
Yeah, for sure.
you're part and parcel of someone else's story and they likewise for you.
Yeah. So, Tony, thank you very much for taking the time today to be interviewed. I really enjoyed it, and I want to wish you the best of luck in your further pursuits.
Thank you for inviting me, and hopefully your audience has got something out of our 1 hour talk today. Thanks,
I hope
Robert.
so. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.